Shalom and welcome to the One Pasuk podcast, where the rabbis at Congregation Avas Torah each share an insight on one particular pasuk from the parsha and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Chaim Pupko, and I am joined by my dear friends and teammates, Rabbi Daniel Goldberg,
Shalom,
and Rabbi Morty Jesus.
Shalom.
This week's episode of the One Pasuk podcast is generously sponsored by Dina and Gilad Attensasser in celebration of the Ufruf of their son Leo and his forthcoming marriage to Danny Satrin, daughter of Annette and Rob Satrin of Lawrence, New York. Mazel tov to Leo's grandparents, Brenda and Sam Attensaser, and Sharon and Jack Siegel. Mazel tov to all the Englewood Attensassers, including Jenna and Josh, Jessica and Harry, Anna and Alex, and Sarah and Uncle Yaakov, and cousins Tali and Max. Thank you so much for your support of the One Pasuk podcast, and in that merit, may Leo and Danny build a home that is a source of nachas in good health and happiness. Mazel tov. To sponsor an upcoming episode, please just reach out to us here at the Shul. All right, let's get this started. All right, our one pasuk for this week, Parshas Miketz, Perek Mem Beis, chapter 42, pasuk Tes, verse 9. In the midst of yet another crippling famine, Yaakov has sent his 10 sons to Egypt to obtain food. Unbeknownst to them, it's their own son and brother who is the reason why Egypt has so much food to begin with. And when the brothers appear before this person who they thought was this Egyptian official, who is really Yosef, the pasuk says, "Vayiskor Yosef es hachalomos asher cholam lohem." Yosef recalls the dreams that he dreamed about them. Vayomer alehem, and Yosef says to the brothers, "Meraglim atem lir'os es ervas haaretz basem." You are spies. You have come to see the land in its nakedness, its vulnerabilities. And I chose this pasuk because it's one of my favorite psukim. It really is. Because it's a pasuk that quite intentionally begins to weave together different parts of a story, which I find so fascinating. Meaning, at this critical, dramatic juncture, Yosef thinks all the way back to the beginning, all the way back to how we got to this point. And I just find that so dramatic, so compelling. And at the same time, though, it doesn't tell us what exactly he remembers. So I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say, whether you're even going to talk about dreams, but I know what I want to talk about.
So the pasuk certainly invites us to consider, I would say broadly, two major possibilities that we find among the Mefarshim, and that is either Yosef remembers everything he went through, and he begins to essentially punish the brothers for what they did to him. He remembers the dreams, he remembers the past, he remembers all the bad times, and now he's going to give them a difficult run for their money. The alternative is to say that, no, Yosef remembered the dreams, and he immediately kicks into action to try and realize them, to bring them to fruition. I want to go with that second approach, which I think is probably the more simple approach, although maybe a blend of the two is where the truth lies. I wonder if either of you will discuss that further. But assuming that Yosef basically jumps into action to make the dreams come true, I want to just cast this in a little bit of a broader lens, looking at the parsha more broadly. There are 3 sets of dreams in this parsha. There's the dreams of Paro, the dreams of the butler and the baker, and now a reference back to Yosef's dreams. And if we just think about what the dreams really mean, what they prompt us to do, you'll see that there's a big disparity here. When it comes to Paro's dreams, Paro foretells something that will inevitably happen, and it's a kind of warning so that you can prepare yourself and, in a certain sense, save yourself from the worst implications of the dreams. It's a warning and save yourself. So that's why Paro gets that dream. When it comes to the butler and the baker, they're told one's going to live, one's going to die. There's nothing to do about it. It's just an inevitability. The dream is there for what purpose? I mean, presumably Hashem planted this dream for the purpose of helping Yosef down the line. But as far as the butler and the baker go, the dreams are, okay, now you know a day early, basically, or, in a few days. What's remarkable and what we take for granted is that Yosef recalls his dreams and he doesn't treat it like the other sets of dreams. He doesn't say this is inevitable. He doesn't say this is going to happen no matter what I do, like the butler and the baker. And neither does he say this is some sort of warning. I have to make sure this doesn't happen, right? Like Paro's dream, it's a warning. I have to make sure that we don't end up in this unfortunate situation. Yosef understands that his dream is the kind of dream that requires human intervention. That requires it's not just a dream, a vision of the future, but it's a mandate. This is a mission. And I think thinking about like the different dreams that we have and how we relate to them, is this destiny and it's going to happen automatically? Or is this a Yosef dream that I'm going to be put into a position to try and realize and actualize, but it's really up to me? Yosef says, I have to make this dream happen now. And that's what he jumps into action here. And you can apply this in so many different ways, but thinking about our dream of Medinat Yisrael being Reishis Tzmichas Ge'ulasenu, it's not a butler and a baker dream that's going to happen by itself, me'elav. It's a Yosef dream that we have to make it that, right? We have to actively work to create the kind of place that can be Reishis Tzmichas Ge'ulasenu. It's not a foregone conclusion. So I think thinking about it, those different formulas and seeing the contrast is a very sharp kind of entry point into the parsha. If you will it, it is no dream. It is no dream. Very good, Rabbi. Excellent.
I was going to take us in a totally different direction. The pasuk begins a series of challenges that the brothers are going to have to face in Egypt. And at the onset of this is Yosef's accusation of miraglim atem. You're a bunch of spies. You don't belong here. You're here for nefarious purposes, and I'm on to you. And then one challenge and one setback after the other follows this initial accusation of them being spies. And a beautiful thought from the Sfat Emet is, if you really look a few psukim earlier, the pasuk says, "Vayerdu ahei Yosef." The brothers of Yosef came down, asara, 10 of them, lishbor bar b'mitzrayim. Now, at this point, anytime the Torah referred to them, it was the children of Yaakov. Here, it's the brothers of Yosef. Why? Because now they finally did teshuvah, and now they're considered brothers again. And the question then is, only after they achieve the level of teshuvah, that's when they have to suffer all these consequences for their initial deeds. Wouldn't you imagine that they still haven't done teshuvah, and Hashem says, okay, I'm going to punish you further, you still have to come around. But here they're being identified as Ahei Yosef. They see eye to eye with Yosef. They love Yosef again. They feel terrible. In fact, they were willing to take all the money that they brought with them to purchase food. They were willing to redeem Yosef. They went to the market to see if Yosef was still being sold there. Maybe he's changing hands at this time. They were trying to find Yosef. And so why then do they suddenly get thrust into challenge after challenge after challenge? And the Sfat Emet says that in life, we have to be deserving and worthy of a challenge. Sometimes we find ourselves experiencing something difficult, and we feel that Hashem has abandoned us. We feel frustrated, we feel upset. But little do we realize, because we've accomplished so much, because we were willing to make certain commitments and had certain successes, Hashem says now is the time for you to be tested. In fact, this is exactly what happened in Yosef's life. When Yosef becomes Yosef HaTzadik, at the moment in which he was able to withstand the temptation of Eshet Potiphar, he was called Yosef HaTzadik. A minute later, he found himself in a dungeon. And he had no idea when he's ever going to get out. In fact, when you were put in jail back then, you could safe to assume you were going to be there for life. You were going to die there. And Yosef suddenly thinks to himself, I was able to withstand such a test, and now I'm thrown in jail? And the Sfat Emet says, yes, precisely. Because you were able to withstand that test, Hashem says, now you're ready for the next test. Sometimes we're not at that level. Once the brothers were willing to commit and say to themselves, we made a mistake. We love Yosef. We feel terrible about what we did. Hashem says, okay, miraglim atem. How are you going to deal with this challenge? And then the next challenge with Binyamin. And then the one after that. And suddenly they were probably thinking to themselves, what's going on here? When in fact, it is precisely the opposite. It's counterintuitive. But in fact, sometimes in order for us to be able to take the next step and to get to that next level, it is the onset of a series of challenges immediately after a particular success.
So I wanted to share something similar to what Rabbi Goldberg mentioned in terms of what Yosef learns about his dreams, but a little bit of a different direction. When it says that Yosef remembered the dreams, so it doesn't just say he remembered the dreams, it's Asher Chalam Lohem, which the way I translated it before sounded like that he dreamed about them. But that doesn't really mean, at least to me, what Asher Chalam Lohem means. Lohem means like to them, right? He dreamed to them, or maybe it's referencing the fact that dreams that he told to them. But I believe at this moment, Yosef recognizes that these dreams are about his destiny and about what he is going to accomplish, the role that he's going to play in Hashem's plan for this family. But I think more than that, what Yosef realizes is that what caused all this strife between him and his brothers and the confusion of his father is the fact that they never understood these dreams. They never understood what they meant. The fact that everyone's bowing down to Yosef in these dreams, that he's going to rule over them, that was confusing to all of them. They didn't understand it. And what Yosef learns at that moment, when he sees that the brothers come down to get food from him, is that the bowing down is not about rulership. The bowing down is about support. The bowing down represents the fact that Yosef will be the one to save the family, to take care of the family. And that's what he says when he reveals himself. He says, Ki lemechiyah shalachani, right? Hashem sent me to sustain you. Everything that happened is a fulfillment of those dreams, and those dreams were not about, I'm better than you, I'm in charge, I have the power. Just the opposite. I have the opportunity to support you, to help you, to be the one you can all count on. And that's what Yosef becomes. And so the fact that he orchestrates this whole plan, I give him the credit that he's doing it in order to bring about that mission. And that's what I think is so beautiful about this pasuk, because I believe it's at this moment that Yosef finally understands the interpretation of his dreams, something that plagued him and his family for their entire lives until now.
That's really so beautiful. And I guess you would say after a whole sefer in which you have siblings and rivalries and the question of who's going to kind of have the mantle and who's going to have that leadership, the final realization of Yosef is that ultimately it's not a function of who has the control, but of who has the responsibility. That leadership and taking up the mantle is really about giving, and it's not about what you get and the honor and the glory. It's about the obligation.
Right, exactly. And it's reflected almost mirror-like when Yehuda has his own moment. Anochi ervenu. When Yehuda says, I will guarantee the life of Binyamin. And so it's not just the story of one person. It's not just the story of Yosef. It's a story of a family that has a number of leaders who are all finding their roles in this grand mission, in this destiny that Hashem has for the Jewish people. And for
Reuven into the mix also. He was the one who took responsibility to take Yosef out of the pit. But I think that's beautiful because each one of those initial sibling rivalries was all so self-centered and like, how do I put myself at the top of all of this? And then suddenly, I guess one additional perspective of why Yaakov's children, why Yaakov was considered someone who had a mitah shlema, was because even as there was some infighting, it was never about who's going to take control, but rather who's going to assume that responsibility to ensure the success and the continuity of Am Yisrael through the brothers.
You know, I wonder at this point if this can be used as a tool for someone who may have difficulty kind of finding their place or not knowing what to do with their lives, and they're a little unsure. And I wonder if you could use this as a tool that if you think about what can I provide for others, as opposed to what do I want to do, what's meaningful to me, which is also important, what I love to do. Also think about, well, what can I contribute? What can I provide to others? Maybe that's an opening to help someone find direction in life. Something to think about.
Beautiful.
Right. Shabbos.
כל אחד עובר מבול, לכל אחד יש איזה הבל שהוא מקנא בו עד מוות, בכל אחת מגדל של מרד ובלבול. כל אדם הולך לו מבית אבא, כל אחד כמעט עוקד את בנו, עמוק בפנים יש סדום קטנה שהוא רק רוצה למחוק כבר, ויש מלאכים שימלטו אותו, וגם